champ now.
Yes, I didn't say. What are you looking so sad about, champ?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, one time during my career, I was on a Formula One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
Well, you've been on the tour.
What's happening, my people? It's Cast Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. And that's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Miss Cass, Ken Saul Love 1, Jarrell Hattie, Bruce Gas, Boxing Jazz, and more. Salute to everyone. And welcome to another episode of Cast Sports, the Boxtorian. Today, boxing history, decade by decade. Has the family today. That's right, Bruce Gas. Anyway, was always very impressive. Got up off the mat and got his man out of there again. Great fight. Great weekend of fights. But how is the family today? We're right back at the beginning of another big week of boxing history. We're going to go over boxing history a little differently today. We're going to go from every decade, starting in 1900 all the way up to 2019. We're not going to do the 2020s because we only had 5 years so far. Some big things might happen in the last 5 years, so we're going to wait till they happen. We're going to go from 1900 to 1909, all the way to 2010 to 2019, every decade. We're going to look at some fights, fighters, and some historical things that occurred in each decade, okay? Coming up today on Cast Sports. Got a good one for you, okay? But first, for the highlights of boxing history today, we are going to look at what was the biggest mismatch in heavyweight boxing history, okay? We're going to look at the biggest mismatch in heavyweight boxing history today for the highlights of boxing history to take us to about 2:30ish. We're going to start talking about this boxing history. But how was everybody's weekend? Enjoy the fights? Yeah, I enjoyed them. Man, Rolly surprised me. I had picked Ryan to win that one, but Rolly, that new trainer has worked wonders with him, man. You see Rolly using that jab, and he was more defensive responsible than I ever seen him, man. You know, Rolly always swing for the fences, leave himself wide open. Not Friday. Rolly was keeping that hand up in front of his face. You know, when he swung, he was bringing his hand back to guard his face. Yeah. Rolly was very impressive. And it's ironic. He caught Ryan with a left hook in that second round and put him down. That's what I thought Ryan was going to get Rolly with. But that's why they have the fights, you know. You can say what's going to happen on paper, but you got to get in that ring and have it out. And so what's next? Is it Rolly versus Devin now? Because they were setting up Ryan and Devin rematch, right? But now Rolly done upset the apple cart. So what happens now? It'll be interesting to see. I'm getting this. What was the worst? What was the biggest mismatch in the heavyweight boxing history? I was running late today. Don't have my images or nothing right. Had to make a little trip this morning way on the other side of town. Got back at 1 o'clock. But we're going to get it in. The profile this week is going to be Jack Johnson. We've never did the Galveston Giant. So Friday, the life and career of Jack Johnson. And we finally going to get Vermont in. We've been trying the last couple of weeks, but I missed last week. I missed the last 2 Thursdays. But this week, Boxing in the States is going to be history of boxing and significant events and boxers from Vermont. Okay, so let's get to the highlights of boxing history. It's getting late fast. What was the biggest mismatch in heavyweight boxing history? But how's everybody today? So Canelo and Bud is all set up, right? I got Canelo in that one by decision. Been a while since Canelo knocked somebody out. Okay, here we go. What was the biggest mismatch in heavyweight boxing history? Okay. Like I said, don't have my pictures or nothing set up. So yeah, we'll leave that up there. Now, the biggest mismatch in heavyweight history was the so-called title fight between Joe Louis and Johnny Davis. Okay. On one side, the heavyweight champion of the world, 53-1, who had not lost in 8 years, right? Joe Louis. On the other side, a very low-level club fighter who was 3-3 and had just been knocked out 37 days before by a career middleweight. Okay? So what was he even doing fighting Joe Louis? Now, the fight was supposed to be an exhibition to raise money for the Navy Relief Fund during World War II. But the New York State Athletic Commission, in the person of its chairman, General John J. Phelan, ordered the exhibition to be a title fight. It was the worst mismatch in heavyweight history. Now, how did this happen? Johnny Davis of Brooklyn, New York, was a low-level club fighter who ended his career with a record of 5 wins and 20 losses. He was 3-3 at the time he was fighting Joe Louis for the title. Had just been knocked out like a month before, 37 days before that fight, right? 5-20 career record. His knockout percentage was 8%, okay, 8% knockout ratio. His winning percentage was 20%. And he was knocked out 76% of the time in his fights. So 7 out of 10 fights, he got knocked out. What was he doing in it with Joe Louis? Davis had, in fact, been beaten up and stopped just 37 days before the exhibition against Louis by a very fat and out of shape career middleweight. Now, Joe Louis had been heavyweight champion for over 7 years. Like I said, he was 53 wins, just 1 loss, with 46 knockouts. He had made 21 straight successful title defenses at that point against top contenders. Now, the original plan was to have Sergeant Joe Louis on leave in New York, stage an exhibition with a local fighter who was no threat, right? And be part of the exhibition to raise money for the wounded sailors and their families. Now, this was a last-minute event organized when the Navy Relief Fund found out Sergeant Joe Louis was on leave in New York, okay? BN Boxing News in the building. What's up, BN Boxing News? And Kensaw Love one, and put some sky blue in the chat. Salute Kensaw Love one, appreciate you 1000%. And salute to BN Boxing News. Okay? All right. We got to give a hand for that sky blue Kensaw Love one put in there, right? No, we got to do that. Appreciate you, Kensaw Love one. Okay, now we're talking about the biggest mismatch in heavyweight history. We had Joe Louis, 53 wins, 1 loss at the time, 46 knockouts, okay? Going up against this guy that was 3-3, got knocked out 76% of the time in his fights and had an 8% knockout ratio, okay? Now, they fixed this fight up real fast when they found out Joe Louis, because he was in the Army then. He was on leave in New York, right? And it was to make money for the Navy Relief Fund, okay? So Louis, always willing to raise money for servicemen and their families and needing a sparring session, agreed to the fight. However, because Joe was there on leave, his normal sparring partners who traveled with him to stage events for military audiences were not with him. So a local guy had to be found for an exhibition sparring partner, okay? Because most boxers were away at war, the organizers had to scramble to find a local guy for the exhibition. They found a guy who was a bottom-level club fighter, Johnny Davis, okay? Now, Davis was honored to accept this fight until the chairman of the New York State Athletic Commission thundered to the press. He said, "There are no exhibitions in boxing in New York. It will be recorded as a title fight. Mr. Lewis's title is on the line." Now, not only did Chairman General John J. Freeland order the exhibition to be recorded as a title fight, he then mandated that instead of the 16-ounce sparring gloves Joe would use, he had to wear 6-ounce regular gloves, okay? So this guy said, we're not even going to use the sparring gloves. We're going to use 6-ounce regular fighting gloves, okay? Well, you can imagine how this thrilled both of them were. Now, for Davis, it went from being a chance to have his family and friends watch him goof around and spar with Joe Louis, to his being certain of a swift and merciless beating in front of his family and friends. For Louis, he remembered the advice of his dead but beloved trainer, Jack Blackburn. Never play around. Anything can happen. No matter who it is, take them seriously. Get them out of there. It took Joe Louis 7 punches in 53 seconds, and home he went after waiting for Davis to wake up so he could be sure he had not killed him. The relief fund was happy it collected its money. Davis was happy to be alive when he woke up, and the crowd was less than pleased with the brevity of this fight, but happy to see the always popular Sergeant Joe Louis. Tommy Holmes of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle newspaper noted, Davis was very careful not to anger the champ and prolong his misery. Davis did not make as much as a menacing gesture toward the heavyweight champion in the 53 seconds that the fight lasted. Now, Davis was a fine example of something Max Baer called the Louis feeling. I define fear as standing across the ring from Joe Louis and knowing he wants to go home early. Louis versus Davis was not considered a title defense by anyone or anybody except the chairman of the New York State Athletic Commission. Right. Now, first of all, Louis, the National Boxing Association, and the Hall of Fame all did not and do not consider it or count it as a title defense. Yet, to this day, the New York State Athletic Commission has it as a title defense. Louis was embarrassed he was made to fight a guy. Louis was embarrassed that he was made to fight a guy who was 3-3 against club fighters and had lost all 3 of his defeats by stoppage. Had this fight counted anywhere but New York, Louis would have 26 successful title defenses, not 25. That's the discrepancy when you hear 26 sometimes and 25 sometimes. 26 is counting this one, okay? So most people say 25 because they don't count this as a title defense. In fact, everyone in the country knew why the New York State Athletic Commission, in the person of its chairman, General John J. Freeland, had ordered Louis's title to be at risk right before a charity exhibition. New York State Athletic Commission had a rule in effect at that time saying there were no such things as exhibitions if the champion entered the ring under New York State Athletic Commission rules. The title was at stake whenever the champion faced a man under Queensberry rules. Since the champion was entering the ring under the standard rules, he had to wear regulation gloves, there were judges, and the fight counted if he had lost for any reason. Louis, faced with withdrawing from a charity event for wounded servicemen, went ahead, but instead of playing around as exhibitions usually did, he hit Davis with 6 jabs and a right and went home. The servicemen getting the money. 7 punches, 6 jabs, and a right. Okay? However, no one counts that as a title defense. Louis's record of 25 title defenses of an undisputed title does not count the Davis fight. It is also not listed in the records of Swift's heavyweight title defenses because, except in New York, no one else considered it a title fight or records it as same. But it unquestionably was the biggest mismatch in heavyweight history. Yeah. That was the biggest mismatch in heavyweight history right there. Joe Louis versus Johnny Davis. Okay, now let's talk some boxing history. I didn't hit the like myself. Wow. Okay, today is boxing history, decade by decade. Okay, we're gonna start from the decade 1900 to 1909 and go all the way to 2010 to 2019. Okay, so let's get started. I just found some pictures somewhere to put up there because I didn't make a slide display today. I was late, so forgive me. A nice, beautiful pictures, but yeah, they have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, 1900 to 1909, first decade of the 20th century. Now, in the period from 1900 to 1909, boxing saw a shift in prominence and regulation. Fights were often long and brutal, sometimes lasting over 40 rounds. This era saw the rise of figures like Jim Jeffries and Bob Fitzsimmons, who dominated the heavyweight and other weight divisions, and the emergence of black champions like Joe Gans and Jack Johnson, who broke racial barriers. Now, regulation began to take hold, with states like New York enacting laws to restrict or prohibit fights. Now, key developments. Okay. Long fights and brutality. Fights often extended to 40 plus rounds with no modern safety concerns, leading to grueling and dangerous battles. Okay, the rise of champions. Jim Jeffries and Bob Fitzsimmons became legendary heavyweights, while figures like Joe Gans and Jack Johnson rose to prominence as black champions. Regulation and prohibition. States like New York began enacting laws to regulate or outright prohibit boxing, particularly in public settings, leading to the need for fights to be held in private clubs. Now, popularity and promotion. Boxing was becoming a popular spectator sport with crowds numbering in the thousands for major events. Early promoters. George Tex Rickard, known as the sport's first great promoter, helped grow the sport's commercial appeal. Okay. Joe Gans became the first Black American to win a world championship. Jack Johnson became the first Black American to win the world heavyweight title, defeating Tommy Burns in 1908. Tommy Burns defended his heavyweight title multiple times, including against fireman Jim Flynn, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, and Bill Squires. Now, the fight of that decade, 1900 to 1909, let's talk about that. Joe Gans versus Battling Nelson won. First fight between those two fighters. September 3rd, 1906, Goldfield, Nevada. Now, this classic confrontation was promoted by no other than the legendary Tex Rickard. Now, the stakes were the undisputed lightweight championship of the world and $30,000 worth of gold coins. Now, Goldfield, Nevada was the perfect location because Goldfield was one of the greatest mining camps of all time, okay? Now, a crowd of over 8,000 people came to witness the two great lightweight fight, okay? Now, the matchup turned out to be an all-time great fight. It was a lightweight version of Ali Frazier. Now, Gans was the craftsman with superior footwork, and he was boxing, jabbing, countering, and throwing short combinations to punish Nelson, the aggressor, as he tried to come inside. Now, Nelson bulled forward, willing to absorb punishment in order to land his own shots, right? This was not a 15-round battle, but a 40-plus round war. Now, Gans swept the early rounds, outboxing Nelson, and he dropped Nelson in the 8th round. Now, Gans actually helped Nelson to his feet, and after Gans helped Nelson to his feet, Nelson spat blood on Joe and kicked him in the shins. What an ungrateful. Joe probably wish he would have left him down there now. Now, gradually, Nelson began to have success on the inside, and he won his first round of the fight in the 10th. Okay? Now, the next 4 rounds were close, but the tide began to turn in Nelson's favor as he kept up relentless pressure along with a savage body attack. Then, in the 15th round, Gans dropped Nelson a second time with a right cross to the jaw, and he did not help him up this time. Okay? Now, the rough and determined Nelson rallied to win round 16 to 19. Gans roared back to take the 20th round, nearly knocking Nelson out with a ferocious flurry of punches in the final minute of the round. Now, Gans seemed to be in control for the rest of the fight. Nelson, whose face was a bloody mess, did rally around the 30th round as he refused to give up. In the 33rd round, Gans broke his right hand with a blow on the top of Nelson's head. Gans fought on, however, continuing to box brilliantly, beating Nelson with his great left jab. Now, unable to penetrate the old master's defense and taking a serious beating, Nelson, who had been warned numerous times by referee Harry Sala for low blows, was disqualified in the 42nd round. And remember, Gans broke his hand in the 33rd round, so he fought the last 9 rounds of the fight with a broken hand, the old master. Okay, we got 1910 to 1919. And that fight is like from 2015. Told you the pictures all mixed up, but anyway. 1910 to 1919, the second decade of the 20th century. Now, in the boxing world between 1910 and 1919, Jack Johnson dominated the heavyweight division, continuing his reign that began in 1908. His victory over James J. Jeffries in 1910 sparked the Johnson-Jeffries riots due to the racial tensions of the time. Now, Johnson's reign was marked by reluctance to fight other Black opponents, despite his own Black heritage. Now, the decade also saw the rise of Jess Willard, who briefly held the title after defeating Johnson in 1915. Additionally, Jack Dempsey emerged as a dominant force in the 1920s, ultimately taking the title from Willard in 1919. Now, key figures and events of this decade. Jack Johnson, the first Black world heavyweight champion. His victory over Jeffries was a landmark moment, but also a source of racial tension and riots. James J. Jeffries. Jeffries was a former champion. He was nicknamed the Great White Hope and fought Johnson in 1910, but lost. Jess Willard. Jess Willard won the title from Johnson in 1915, but his reign was short-lived. Jack Dempsey. Dempsey defeated Willard in 1919, marking the beginning of his dominant era in the heavyweight division, which lasted 8 years. Now, also in the 1910s, 1910 to 1919, the rise of 15-round fights. Okay? The 1910s and 1920s saw the gradual adoption of 15-round limits for boxing matches, which benefited fighters like Jack Dempsey. Okay? Okay, that's the 1910 to 1919. Okay? 1920 to 1929. Let's give y'all something to look at. That's like 1950. Yeah. 1920 to 1929. Now, boxing experienced the first golden age during the 1920s, marked by the rise of Jack Dempsey as a major celebrity and the legalization of boxing in many states. Now, the decade also saw the emergence of iconic figures like Gene Tunney and Harry Wills, as well as the establishment of the National Boxing Association. Key aspects of boxing in the 1920s. Legalization and popularity. Boxing was banned in the early 1900s, but was legalized in New York in 1920 through the Walker Law. Other states followed, including Chicago in 1926. This legalization led to increased popularity, and boxing became a significant social event. Again, Jack Dempsey dominated the sport through much of the decade. He won the title in 1919, keeping it until 1926, 7 years. He lost the title to Gene Tunney in 1926, but many of his fights were historic, such as his defenses against Georges Carpenter, Louis Firpo, and Tom Gibbons. Dempsey's 1927 rematch against Tunney became known in boxing history as the long count fight. Dempsey became a household name and married Hollywood actresses. Now, Tex Ricard's influence, promoter Tex Ricard, continued to play a prominent and significant role in popularizing boxing during the 1920s. And boxing was a symbol of ethnic pride. Every immigrant neighborhood had its own champion, and boxing became a symbol of ethnic pride. Now, changes in rules and practices occurred during the 20s too. Fights were limited to 15 rounds for title fights. Medical personnel were mandated to be present at all fights. And certain moves, like headbutting, were banned, okay? Establishment of the National Boxing Association, or the NBA. Now, in 1921, the National Boxing Association was formed, which is considered the predecessor to the World Boxing Association, or the WBA. Women's boxing during the 20s. Now, while women's boxing was not widely accepted at that time, some notable figures like Annie Newton and Madge Baker were involved in exhibition fights. In summary, the 1920s was a period of great growth and popularity for boxing, with iconic boxers, prominent promoters, and changes in regulations shaping the sport in the decade of the 1920s. Okay. Now, the 1930s. Now, boxing in the 1930s was a period of notable champions and exciting matchups, particularly in the heavyweight division. Prominent figures like Max Schmeling and Max Baer, along with the eventual champion Joe Louis, helped to keep the sport popular despite economic challenges. Okay? Okay. Key events and figures. Okay, Joe Louis. Louis became world champion in 1937 and held the title until 1949, dominating the heavyweight division. Max Schmeling. Schmeling was a formidable opponent, winning the first fight against Joe Louis in 1936, which was Louis' first loss. But Schmeling lost the rematch in 1938. Max Baer. Baer was another significant heavyweight, holding the title briefly before losing it to Joe Louis. James J. Braddock, also known as Cinderella Man. Braddock faced challenges during the Great Depression, eventually winning the World Heavyweight title in 1938. Henry Armstrong, known as Homicide Hank. Armstrong was a dominant boxer in the 1930s, holding multiple world titles, in different weight classes. The great Barney Ross. Ross was a successful boxer, holding the lightweight title and known for his boxing skills. Primo Carnera. Carnera became world heavyweight champion, but his reign was short-lived. Jackie Fields. Fields won the world welterweight title in 1931. Johnny Jadick. Jadick became the world junior welterweight champion in 1931. Gorilla Jones. Jones won the vacant world middleweight title also in 1931. Okay. Now, popularity and cultural significance. Now, boxing was a popular sport in the 1930s, often representing ethnic pride and neighborhood rivalries. The fights between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling took on political significance, symbolizing the struggles between democracy and fascism. The Great Depression impacted boxing, with some fighters like Braddock facing financial hardship but finding success in the ring. Now, because of the suffering American economy, many boxers were offered low amounts of money, causing them to only box for passion. The sport of boxing suffered during the decade due to the lack of money to pay the boxers. Also during the 1930s, boxing became a source of entertainment and a way for people to connect with their communities. Okay, 1930s. All right. The decade of the 1940s. We're going decade by decade today. 1940s. The 1940s was another golden era for boxing, dominated by fighters like Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson, and featured a blend of thrilling fights and rising stars. Louis, the longest reigning heavyweight champion, continued his reign in the 40s, while Robinson's emergence marked a new era of boxing prowess. Other notable figures included Ezzard Charles, Willie Pep, Marcel Cerdan, and Jimmy Bivens. Key events and highlights of the 40s. Of course, Joe Louis's reign. Louis dominated the heavyweight division, famously knocking out several former champions. Sugar Ray Robinson's rise. Robinson, known for his speed, footwork, and power, became a major force in boxing. Ezzard Charles, challenge. Charles, a skilled boxer, challenged Louis for the heavyweight title and fought several top contenders. Other notable fighters of the 1940s, Willie Pep, a featherweight champion, known for his pep, quick reflexes, and all-time great defense. Marcel Cerdan, a French boxer who had memorable wins over Tony Zale and Sugar Ray Robinson. Jimmy Bivens, a boxer who fought top contenders like Ezzard Charles. Okay, Ike Williams, a lightweight world champion known for his power. The great Tony Zale fought in a famous rivalry with Rocky Graziano. They had a great trilogy. Billy Conn, a talented British boxer who fought and nearly upset a prime Joe Louis. Bob Montgomery fought a competitive series of fights with Ike Williams and Bojack. Not Bo Mack, Bojack. And this is in the 1940s, okay? Now, the 1940s saw boxing gain popularity, with fights attracting large crowds and television coverage becoming a big part of the sport. Sugar Ray Robinson's battles with Jake LaMotta began during the decade, and the intense rivalry between Rocky Graziano and Tony Zale captivated audiences. The Murderers Row fighters. Throughout the 1940s, 8 Black American boxers were highly avoided by many of the top fighters who fought during the decade, including Sugar Ray Robinson, who avoided Charles Burley. The Murderers Row fighters were Charles Burley, Eddie Booker, Jack Chase, the Coco Kid, Burt Lytell, Lloyd Marshall, Evan Wade, and Holman Williams. Charles Burley, Eddie Booker, Jack Chase, the Coco Kid, Burt Lytell, Lloyd Marshall, Evan Wade, and Holman Williams. That's 8. Okay, let's look at the 1950s. Working our way through the decades. In boxing history, decade by decade. The 1950s. Got some other good stuff when this is over too. Okay. The 1950s. Now, the 1950s in boxing was a period of significant talent and controversy, marked by the rise of the legendary Rocky Marciano, the continuing greatness of Sugar Ray Robinson from the 40s, and the emergence of Floyd Patterson as the youngest heavyweight champion at that time. This era also saw the dark side of boxing come to light, with allegations of fight throwing and associations with organized crime. Key figures and events. Rocky Marciano. He became the only heavyweight champion to retire with a perfect record, defeating Jersey Joe Walcott for the title in 1952. Sugar Ray Robinson continued his legendary career, winning and losing world titles during the decade. Okay. Floyd Patterson became the youngest heavyweight champion, defeating Archie Moore in 1957. Jersey Joe Walcott, the oldest heavyweight champion ever in 1951. That record held for 43 years until George Foreman regained the title in 1994. Archie Moore reigned as light heavyweight world champion for 10 consecutive years and is number 2 all-time in knockouts with 132. Ezzard Charles continued his great career in the 50s and was a reliable replacement for Joe Louis as heavyweight champion early in the decade. The great Jake LaMotta allegedly threw a fight with Billy Fox in exchange for a shot at the middleweight title. And the final of 6 fights against Sugar Ray Robinson occurred in the 50s on February 14th, 1951, which was called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Okay, and we had the controversy in the 50s. Mafia connections. Some promoters and fighters were associated with organized crime. The International Boxing Club, or the IBC, was formed as a corporation that promoted boxing. It was revealed that the IBC was connected to known organized crime figures. Now, overall trends for the 50s. The 1950s saw a surge in talent, especially in the middleweight and welterweight divisions. The United States continued to dominate boxing in the heavier weight classes. Boxing gained additional popularity due to television coverage, making the sport a major source of entertainment, and the decade saw a rise in boxing figures being featured in the media. Okay, the 1950s. Okay, let's go to the 1960s. We're going all the way up to the 2010 to 2019. 1960s. Okay. The boxing landscape in the 1960s was dominated by charismatic personalities and thrilling heavyweight matchups, marking a golden age, another golden age for the sport. Key figures like Muhammad Ali, Sonny Liston, and Smoking Joe Frazier captivated audiences, and the rise of television continued to fuel boxing's popularity. Okay, who will forget that historic Olympic run back to back to back? Cassius Clay in 1960 in Rome, Smoking Joe Frazier in 1964 in Tokyo, and Big George Foreman, just 18 years old with 21 amateur fights in Mexico City, 1968. Beat a Russian in the gold medal match that had over 200 fights. And here Big George, the Russian was like 30. 12 years older than Big George with almost 200 more fights, and Big George beat him for the gold medal. Okay. Now, Muhammad Ali's rise. Ali, then known as Cassius Clay, became a global icon. With his boxing prowess, he dethroned Sonny Liston in 1964, marking a pivotal moment in his career. Okay, heavyweight dominance in the 60s. The 1960s saw a surge in the popularity of heavyweight boxing, with memorable classics and charismatic champions. Television's continued influence over the sport. The increasing availability of boxing on television broadened the sport's audiences and introduced new revenue streams, WBA and WBC. In the early 1960s, the National Boxing Association, NBA, became the World Boxing Association, WBA, because boxing was becoming so international at that time. So they went from the National Boxing Association to the World Boxing Association. And the World Boxing Council, WBC, was formed. And those two are currently two of the four major governing bodies in boxing, okay? Less entertainment options. In a time with fewer entertainment choices, boxing was a major source of entertainment, especially for sports fans. Other prominent figures, other than Ali, we had Sonny Liston, a formidable opponent. Liston was the heavyweight champion before Ali's rise to prominence. Smoking Joe Frazier, a future heavyweight champion who rose to prominence during this era after Ali was suspended. Ingemar Johansson, another heavyweight champion from this era. Johansson had a classic and competitive trilogy with Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson continued his great career from the 50s into the 60s. Held the heavyweight title for a period and was involved in some of the most exciting fights of the decade. Jose Napales, a Cuban-born Mexican boxer and two-time undisputed welterweight champion. Okay, two-time undisputed world welterweight champion, Jose Napales. Okay, 1970s. Now, the 1970s is often considered a golden age for heavyweight boxing, featuring legendary figures like Muhammad Ali returned, Smoking Joe Frazier continued his career from the 60s, and Big George Foreman. Other notable boxers of the era included Ken Norton, Bob Foster, and Carlos Monzon. Foster and Monzon, a couple of fighters other than heavyweight. Foster light heavyweight, Monzon a middleweight great. The decade of the 70s saw the rise of dominant champions and exciting rivalries, shaping the history of the sport. Here's a more detailed look at boxing in the 1970s. Heavyweight dominance. Muhammad Ali. Ali returned to boxing in 1970 after a ban and went on to rule the heavyweight division for much of the decade, including winning, losing, and then regaining the title. Joe Frazier. Frazier held the heavyweight title before Ali's return and faced him 3 times, especially in a highly anticipated fight in 1971, nicknamed the Fight of the Century. Okay, he gave Ali his only loss. Big George Foreman. Foreman defeated Frazier in 1973 and reigned as champion for a period. He was known for his powerful punches. Ken Norton. Talking about the 70s, Ken Norton. Norton also held the heavyweight title during the 1970s, known for his tough and competitive style. Larry Holmes. Holmes emerged as a champion at the end of the 1970s, marking a transition into a new era of heavyweight boxing. Now, other heavyweights, George Chuvalo, Ron Lau, Oscar Bonavena, Jerry Quarry, and Ernie Shavers were also prominent heavyweights of the era, some of whom challenged for the title. Okay? Rivalries and historic fights. Who will forget Ali versus Frazier? Their first fight in 1970, first of 3, first fight in 1971 was a major event and cemented their status as boxing legends. King Carlos Monzon, okay, get it right, King Carlos Monzon. The middleweight champion had a long and successful reign, known for his dominance and skill, reigned undisputed middleweight champion for 7 years in the 70s. Okay. Roberto Duran, the Hands of Stone. Duran's reign as lightweight champion was marked by his legendary rivalry with Esteban de Jesus during the 70s. Esteban de Jesus gave Duran his only loss during the 70s. Roberto was 54 wins to 1 loss during the decade. But he won 2 of the 3. They had a historic trilogy. Duran won 2 of the 3. And you know, most of those champions, anybody who was champion in any weight division in the 70s, almost 100% of them is in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, all of them. Arguello, Sanchez, Gomez, Benitez, all of them in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Talking about the 70s, I can't end the 70s without mentioning Don King. The influential boxing promoter played a significant role in the sport's popularity during the 1970s. Yes, he did. Love him or hate him, Don King played a significant role in the sport's popularity during the 1970s, and so did the Bob Father. Overall significance of the 1970s. The 1970s are remembered for the intense competition, iconic fighters, and exciting rivalries that shaped the sport's history. It was a decade of great heavyweight talent and memorable boxing moments. The 1970s, yeah. Golden age of the heavyweight division. 1980s. I think they had when they had this 4 boxers, what was they called? The 4 something? 4 horsemen? No, the 4 kings, right? That wasn't that what they was called, the 4 kings? Yeah. Just kidding. Now, the 1980s boxing scene was another golden age, featuring legendary rivalries and iconic champions. The decade saw the rise of the 4 kings: Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, the Hands of Stone, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas the Hitman Hearn, who frequently fought each other across mainly the welterweight and middleweight divisions, but also they met in other divisions too, but mainly welterweight and middleweight. In the heavyweight division during the 80s, Larry Holmes dominated the early part of the decade before Mike Tyson emerged as a young, powerful force in the middle of the decade. Key aspects of 1980s boxing: 4 kings in heavyweight dominance, right? Featuring Holmes and Tyson for the heavyweight dominance. Now, light heavyweight era. Now, the light heavyweight division had some of its best ever fighters in the 80s, led by Michael Spinks, Pernell Whitaker, emerging as a top boxer in the late 1980s. Whitaker won the Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year award in 1989. Oh, I forgot the pictures. Oh. Yeah, Whitaker won Fighter of the Year in 1989. I think he had 2 of them, as a matter of fact, though. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Pernell Whitaker. Other notable boxers in the 80s, Evander Holyfield and Donald Curry, also made significant contributions to boxing in the 80s. Okay. 1990s. Okay. As in the 1980s, the 1990s in boxing's popularity focused on all divisions, right? Not just heavyweight, all divisions. When 1980s legends Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, as well as others retired, newer superstars filled the void. Pernell Whitaker, JCC, Julio Cesar Chavez in the early 1990s, Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad, Bernard Hopkins, James Toney, Roy Jones Jr. in the mid to late 1990s. James Lights Out Toney, that is. As for the heavyweight division, Mike Tyson's reign ended prematurely with the upset loss to Buster Douglas. Okay. Former cruiserweight champion Evander Holyfield took over as the undisputed champion of the heavyweight division. and later built a rivalry against former Olympic silver medalist Riddick Bowe. In the later 1990s was dominated by Lennox Lewis, who unified the division in 1999, right before the new millennium, right? Now the 1990s also saw the emergence of the battles between the British super middleweights, Chris Eubank, Michael Watson, and Nigel Benn. Okay. Now for the 2000s, 2000 to 2009, we're going to look at the top 10 boxers of that decade. 2000 to 2009. That's when Manny went through like he was crazy or something, remember? The way Manny went through the 2000. We're going to look at the top 10 boxers of the 2000. I couldn't get the history to come up. I would have wrote something up, but it was late. I didn't have time. So let's look at the top 10 boxers from 2000 to 2009. Okay, how about we do that? Okay. Told you I was late. I used to have all this stuff ready. Okay. 10 of the best boxers of the 2000 to 2009. Okay? No, I don't have no pictures. Stay with me for a minute. I'm not prepared today. But still got a good show for you. People don't know what they missed. Okay, let's get into it. We're gonna look at 10 of the top boxers of the 2000s. Okay, 2000 to 2009, that is, that decade, 2000 to 2009. Okay. Ranking 10 of the greatest boxers between 2000 and 2009. Turn this light off for a minute. That thing is blinding me. Okay. Now, the first decade of this century was marred by economic instability and endless warfare. Still, life continued to go on, and sports fans continued to enjoy their divergence. And the world of boxing saw some legendary fights. It might not have been the greatest decade in the history of the sport, but the 2000s showcased plenty of talent. Everybody on this list is a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? And some first ballot Hall of Famers had to be left off to narrow it down, right? It's always complicated to put together a best of the decade list for sports. Nothing an athlete did in his career outside of the decade can count in this evaluation. It's got to be between 2000 and 2009. Right? But it's always complicated to put together best of the decade list for sports, right? It can be tough to strike the perfect balance between a fighter with a few brilliant years against another one with 8 or 9 years that were very good, but with lower peaks. So here are 10 of the top of the 2000 to 2009, okay? OPW, Punk Select, Wonjong-Kam, the Korean boxer, right? Now, Punk Select Wonjong-Kam captured the lineal and WBC flyweight titles in 2001 and held them for most of the decade. He is a legend in his native Thailand, and throughout the Asia Pacific region, where the level of talent in the lightest weight divisions is high. He compiled a career record of 44 wins, just 1 loss with 1 draw. No. For the decade, 44 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw between 2000 and 2009, right? With his loss and draw both coming against his Japanese rival, Daisuke Naito. Okay, Punk Select Wonjong-Kam. Joe Kawasaki, we just talked about him Friday, remember? Joe Kawasaki. Talking about some of the best fighters between 2000 and 2009. Mike Madsen. So I'm gonna have to scratch Mike Mazic's name out for the first. I pencil Mike in right after Miss Cass before he start. What's up, Mike Mazic? And Al Booker. Another regular. What's up, AB? Yeah, we just went from decade to decade today. From 1900 to 1909 all the way up to 2020. From 2000 to 2009, we're looking at some of the best fighters of that decade, okay? Okay. Number 10 was Pawn Select Wong Jong Cam, and that's right, because I looked up that app to tell you how to pronounce it. Pawn Select Wong Jong Cam, okay? Joe Karzaki, number 9. We just talked about Joe Friday, remember? And Al Booger, this Friday is the Galveston Giant, Jack Johnson. No way, we never did him, never profiled him. I was shocked, but yeah, we're going to do it Friday. The life and career of the Galveston Giant, Jack Johnson. Joe Karzaki retired as the undefeated ring light heavyweight champion after beating Roy Jones Jr. in November 2008. At some point during the previous decade, he was recognized by all 4 major sanctioning bodies as the super middleweight champion of the world, but he didn't have them all at one time, okay? So it was never 4-belt undisputed. He had all 4 of them during the 90s, but never at the same time, okay? Now, Karzaki has a loyal core of fans who are likely to protest that he's rated too low here. But while his ability to remain unbeaten so long was impressive, the quality of his resume was lacking. The 2 biggest names on Karzaki's resume are Jones and Bernard Hopkins. Jones was far past his prime when he faced Karzaki. Hopkins was past 40 at the time of their fight, right? And to make a good argument that B-Hop won that fight, okay? He was past 40. You could make a good argument that he won it. We talked about that Friday, remember? Yeah, split decision. Now, Karzaki's wins over Jeff Lacey, Sakayo Bika, and Mikkel Kessler were all quality performances. Yeah, those were 2 huge names of the era on this list. Jeff Lacey, Sakayo Bika, and Mikkel Kessler, yeah. 3 of the few big names on there. Number 8, we talking about some of the great fighters from 2000 to 2009. Miguel Cotto. Miguel. I got in late. I don't have the images today because I got in late. I just used some old ones that was already in there. Miguel is in there somewhere, but I can't find it. Miguel Cotto was one of boxing's most popular and successful stars during this century, 2000-2009. He captured the junior welterweight title in September 2004 when he TKO'd Kelson Pinto. He defended that belt 6 times, including against Paulie Malignaggi in a memorable Madison Square Garden performance. In December 2006, Cotto moved up to welterweight and beat Carlos Quintana for the title, welterweight title. His list of wins at 147 includes Zab Judah and Sugar Shane Mosley, 2 huge names, okay, during that era, during that decade. Between 2000 and 2009, Cotto lost just twice. Once to Manny Pacquiao, and when Antonio Margarito had those doctored up hand wraps. So that really only 1 loss, because that don't count. It counts, but you know, it's an asterisk by the loss to Margarito. So he got 1 official loss, and he got 1 loss with an asterisk by it. So just 2. It's from 2000 to 2009. Yeah, Margarito was later caught trying to wrap his hands in plaster before a fight with Mosley. And it is now widely believed that he used the same dirty trick against Cotto. You see how he busted Cotto up? But Cotto beat him in the rematch. And it's said many times that was the biggest win of his career. 7, Chris John. Okay. Now, Chris John won the WBA featherweight title in 2004 and he held it up to 2006, right? and he had a defense against the great Juan Manuel Marquez. There could be no doubt that Chris John deserved to rank among the best fighters of his generation, but the Indonesian star rarely fought outside of his country or against other elite fighters from the West. Now, Marquez was a major win on anybody's resume, right? But John had little else to go along with it. But he still makes the list as one of the greatest 2000-2009. Hardcore boxing news, hashtag JBT. It's just boxing talk. What's up, J Hardcore? We just going through the decades today. We're up to the 2000-2009. We started at 1900. Looked at each decade with a highlights history. We're looking at some of the greatest fighters between 2000 and 2009. Okay. Salute, Jay. Hardcore. Hardcore boxing news. Y'all like them fights this weekend? Monster got up again and got the win. I wonder what's going to happen when he get in some of them big punching from 126 pounders. Is he going to get up? Because that's 2 times now. Like the guy that fought right before him, Espinosa. Somebody like that. But Monster said he's fighting MJ next. I think he said August. But yeah, another great fighter between 2000 and 2009, Winky Wright. Winky Wright. Now, by the time the 2000s began, Winky Wright was already an established veteran and former world champion. By 2002, Winky was once more a world champion, earning the IBF junior middleweight title. He was a slick fighter and defensive wizard. Because remember, Winky could be in the high guard and have his face and body covered. Now you hit to the body to make them bring their hands down, and hit to the head, make them bring them up. Not Winky. Winky had the head and body covered. In the high guard, that's how long his reach was. Winky put that high guard up. Only place you could hit it, Winky was low. Because you wasn't hitting that head or body. Yeah, Winky had a nice reach on it for its size, Yeah, Winky was a slick fighter and defensive wizard. He beat Sugar Shane Mosley in back-to-back fights in 2004 and defeated Felix Trinidad in 2005. Yeah, that was 3-2. 3 big fights for him there. Won all of them. After moving up to 160, Winky had a draw with Jermaine Taylor. And he beat Ike Corte decisively. Winky had some big names on that resume. Now, Winky lost to Bernard Hopkins in 2007. He then took most of the rest of the decade off. Looking like a shadow of himself, he was beat pretty much shut out by Paul Williams in 2009. But Winky had a great decade, 2000 to 2009. Yes, he did. Winky Wright, the Winkster. Marco Antonio Barrera, okay? He had a great 2000 to 2009. Marco Antonio did. Yes, he did. Now, the Mexican warrior, Marco Antonio Barrera, was involved in some of the greatest boxing moments of the first decade of this century. Yes, he was. He lost just 4 times during the decade, but look at who he was fighting, man. He was fighting big names every fight, just about. In 2004, he lost to Manny Pacquiao by round 11 TKO. He lost to Pacquiao again in 2007, which was the same year he lost to Juan Manuel Marquez. And he fought the other one. We just did him a couple weeks ago on the profile. I can't think of his name. The other 4 came from the 2000s. Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Marquez, Marco Antonio Barrera, and we're supposed to jump right in there. Let me try it again. Manny Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Marquez, Marco Antonio Barrera, and I can't think of his name. Al Booker got it. Put it in there, Al Booker. We just did him a couple weeks ago, remember? He fought Barrera 3 times, fought Pacquiao. The only matchup between those 4 that didn't happen was him and Marquez, the one I'm talking about. I can't think of his name. It'll come to me. But anyway, yeah, Barrera was involved in some of the greatest moments of the 2000-2009, right? In 2009, He was past his prime and 15 rounds over his ideal fighting weight. He lost to Amir Khan. Now, Barrera beat a laundry list of great fighters. He exposed the undefeated Nassim Hamed. Oh yeah, he retired Nassim Hamed. Remember that? He beat Johnny Tapia, Kevin Kelly, and Rocky Juarez twice. There, Eric Morales. That's who I was talking about. Eric Morales. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. Eric Morales. Yeah, that's him. He won both the second and third fight of his classic trilogy with Morales. Morales won the first one during that decade, giving him a decisive edge in the decade's most thrilling rivalry. That was the best trilogy, one of the best trilogies ever. Eric Morales and Juan Manuel Barrera. Good fights to watch over. You can watch those fights over and over and over, which I do. Okay. Juan Manuel Marquez. He had a great 2000 to 2009. Juan Manuel Marquez. Juan Manuel Marquez, all four of them should be in here. Juan Manuel Marquez spent much of the previous of that decade being avoided. But in 2003, he captured the vacant IBF featherweight title by a TKO over Manuel Medina. He added the WBA strap later that year. In 2004, he defended his title against Manny Pacquiao in what would be the first of four terrific fights between them. Marquez recovered from 3 first-round knockdowns to force a draw. I thought Marquez won that one too, but they gave it a draw. Now, for the decade, Marquez had 20 wins, 3 losses, and that 1 draw. It should have been 21 wins and 3 losses. Shouldn't have had that draw, but you know, the judges called it a draw, so that's what's on Boxrec. Marquez's only losses in the decade came against undefeated stars Chris John and Floyd Mayweather, and by split decision in the second fight against Pacquiao, which was in 2008. Okay. I think he won the draw and that fight, matter of fact. B-Hop, Bernard Hopkins, had a great decade, 2000, 2009. Yes, he did. Now, B-Hop was a reigning middleweight champion when the 2000s began. And he was getting ready to turn 35 years old. And what, he fought like 40 more years after that? In September 2001, he beat Felix Trinidad by round 12 TKO. In 2004, B-Hop knocked out Oscar De La Hoya. Remember that liver punch, kidney punch, whatever they call it. He got him in the side there, and Oscar just crumpled. That was in round 9. Right? And that made him the first 4-belt champion. But that fight was not supposed to happen because Oscar got beat by Felix Sturm. Felix Sturm should have been fighting B-Hop, but they was trying to do the math. What's the bigger fight, Oscar and B-Hop or Felix Sturm and B-Hop for first 4-belt undisputed? Of course, Oscar and B-Hop. So they cheated Felix Sturm, but Felix beat Oscar in that fight, yeah. But yeah, B-Hop beat Oscar to become the first 4-belt undisputed. Then he lost 2 straight fights to Jermaine Taylor in 2005 when he turned 40, okay? But instead of retiring, which seemed like a likely course of action, B-Hop went up to light heavyweight and beat Antonio Tarver to become a 2-division world champion, and then fought 30 more years after that. At 43, B-Hop lost a split decision to Joe Calzaghe. That you could make a good argument that he won that one, right? But again, it looked like he might have reached the end of an amazing career. Nope. B-Hop came back 6 months later in a weight class lower. In October 2008, he faced Kelly Paddock at super middleweight. Now, a lot of boxing writers predicted Paddock would be the first fighter to stop B-Hop. Instead, the ageless wonder Hopkins beat the tar out of Paddock, right? When the decade ended, B-Hop was about to turn 45 and was still a major player in the world of boxing. Yep, Bernard Hopkins, 49 years old, the oldest world champion ever. Okay. And then we got Floyd Mayweather. He was Pretty Boy Floyd in the 2000s. Now, Floyd is probably the best pound for pound fighter of this century, right? And he would have beat Manny no matter whenever they fought. Yeah. Pretty Boy probably would have stopped Manny. Okay. But yeah, Floyd is in second place. Manny made first place, right? They fight 10 times, Floyd wins 10 times, right? And Floyd turned the highly anticipated super featherweight showdown with Diego Corrales in 2001 into a one-sided beatdown, right? He came off the shelf in 2009 to completely shut down Juan Marquez. And I ain't even got to talk about what he did to Arturo Gatti. We don't even have to mention that. We all saw that. He just destroyed Arturo Gatti. And Manny Pacquiao finally. We still got one more decade to go to, 2010 to 2019. Yeah, Manny's only loss between 2000 and 2009 came against Eric Morales in 2004. But he avenged it twice. Stopped Eric twice after that. Now, Manny started the decade as a super bantamweight who had recently undergone a growth spurt from flyweight. And I ain't gonna say that. He wasn't on PEDs. Was he? Now, we don't never tested dirty, so but he just didn't test. But anyway, Manny was an exciting and dangerous southpaw pounder, right? As the decade progressed, he developed into one of the two best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Yeah, everything Manny and Floyd done was compared to each other throughout that decade, right? He finished the decade in sensational fashion. In December 2008, he stopped Oscar De La Hoya in round 8. The following year, he knocked out Ricky Hatton in round 2 and pounded down Miguel Cotto by round 12 TKO, okay? 2000 to 2009. Now let's look at the last. We're not going to do the 2020 because there's only 5 years went past. And 2026 to 2030, something big might happen, so we'll wait till they go past and do 2020 to 2029. Okay, but 2010 to 2019, okay? These pictures, they had nothing to do with this decade. I was late. I just picked some pictures out, some boxing pictures. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's Roy Jones and Joe Kawasaki. That was the last decade that just happened. We just talked about that. Yes, I just talked about that. Okay, who is that? Big George Foreman. That was 1970s. Who is that? Bill Frazier. Is that George? I don't know. JCC, look like Edmund Rosario. Is that JCC and Edmund Rosario? Yeah. That's Sugar Ray and Joe Louis. Did they fight? No. Sugar Ray and Roberto Duran, that was in the 70s. Gene Foreman and Sugar Ray. That's the same picture. Okay, here we go. Hagler and the Beast. Ain't that Mugabe? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's Frazier and somebody. Foreman. Okay, 2010 to 2019, our final decade. Then I got a little history about boxing on TV since we covered that. We was talking about the 40s, remember? Now, boxing in the 2010s, this is 2010 to 2019. Boxing in the 2010s includes notable events about boxing, which occurred between 2010 and 2019. The decade saw high-intensity action in the welterweight division. The fight between veterans Floyd Mayweather and Jr. Manny Pacquiao broke pay-per-view records. Now, the broadcast of the fight in the Philippines was watched by nearly half the country's households, okay, in the Philippines. Now Mayweather retired at a record 50-0, while Pacquiao became the first 8 division champion and first and only. Now the middleweight division saw immense action in the later years of the decade, right? After a draw in 2017, Canelo Alvarez ended Gennady Golovkin's long reign in 2018. And the heavyweight division was dominated by the Klitschko brothers before Vladimir lost to Tyson Fury in 2015. Now, other talents that emerged during the decade was Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, the incredible knockout run Deontay went on, and the first 4-belt undisputed heavyweight champion, Alexander Usyk, emerged during that decade. Yeah, that was the decade of the 2010s, 2010 to 2019. Let's talk about the history of television. Television and boxing became big in the 40s. Yeah, that hurt the gates a lot. The actual gates of the fights a lot because people started staying home. Like, I'm paying for this TV. Why am I paying all that money to go watch the fight, right? I can stay home and watch it. Lay in the bed in my drawers and watch the fight. I ain't got to get all dressed up, Lay there in my briefs, my boxes, and watch the fight, okay? And save money. I already paid for the TV, right? So yeah, TV kind of hurt the gates, but it was a good thing. Good for the boxers, commercials and stuff. They started being promoted outside of the ring, making money outside the ring, Yeah. And when TV came along, you saw a lot more boxers in the media too at that time. Yes, you did. Yeah. But let's talk about it. As everybody today, it's Monday. Those fights were really good. Rolly surprised me. I had picked Ryan to win that one. But Rolly looked good, man. He was jabbing, playing defense, had his hands up. Every punch wasn't a home run punch. Rolly used to, going for the knockout every shot, but yeah. And it's ironic, like I said earlier, what he knocked Ryan down with, that left hook. That's what everybody thought Ryan was going to get Rolly with, right? Rolly, whap, too fast, sharp left hooks, man. That was beautiful. I was like, oh my goodness. But Ryan he got up too fast. He shouldn't have bounced right straight up like that, You get 10 seconds. Use at least 6 start getting up around 6. You'll be up by 8. He jumped up. I don't even know if the referee started counting. Ryan definitely got up too fast. Yeah. Definitely got up too fast. And they had to hurt him because, the way those punches hit, man, his head wasn't cleared when he jumped up. Like, I guess it's a pride thing, though. You're on the mat, jump right up. No. You got 10 seconds, use them. Mm-hmm. Like some of those old fighters did. Like when Joe Frazier knocked Ali down, Ali stayed there, so he damn near got counted out. Ali got up like 9. That's smart though. You get 10 seconds, you get up, you got to get up by 10 seconds. Why jump up at 1 or 2? That's the wrong thing, man. I done messed the chat up. I can't even see the chat. Bear with me for a moment. We're going to talk about the history of boxing on TV. A little bit about it. It's the chat. Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. Got Just Do Boxing coming up at 4 p.m. Jay Hardcore's in here. 8 p.m. in the morning. The Morning Man. Monday through Friday and Sunday, 9 o'clock on Sunday. Right? Salute J Hardcore. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, boxing on TV. Let's talk a little bit about it. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Nothing long. I ain't trying to bore y'all. Now, boxing on television has a long history, dating back to the early days of the media. Now, the first televised boxing match was a 6-round exhibition between Archie Sexton and Laurie Rattieri, broadcast on BBC TV in London in 1933. I think the first one in the United States was like in the 40s, right? But the first boxing match on TV was 1933 in London, England, okay? Now, over time, networks like NBC, ABC, CBS, and ESPN, not ESPN, ESPN, have all played a role in showcasing boxing with different programs and formats evolving throughout the years. Now, let's take a more detailed look at the history. Now, the early days, 1930s through the 1950s. Okay, like I just said, 1933 was the first televised boxing match between Archie Sexton and Laurie Rattieri, was broadcast on BBC TV in London. Yeah, that's a man, Laurie. It wasn't between a man and a woman. Probably short for Laurent. It sounds kind of French, yeah. Anyway, 1940s. NBC began broadcasting boxing on their Cavalcade of Sports program, which ran for 14 years. It was the longest running boxing program in television history. Right, yeah, the first fight in the United States was in the 40s. And that was the longest running boxing program in television history. NBC's Cavalcade of Sports. And no, I never watched that. I ain't that old, okay? Never seen it. 1940s to 1950s. ABC also entered the boxing landscape with programs like Tomorrow's Boxing Champions, Meet the Champ, and Saturday Night Fights. Your Wide World of Sports was later. That was like the 60s and 70s. But they had Tomorrow's Boxing Champions, Meet the Champ, and Saturday Night Fights. 1950, ABC expanded its boxing coverage, including shows like Boxing from Ridgewood Grove, Boxing from Eastern Parkway, and the Wednesday Night Fights. Oh, I heard of Northern Parkway, Boxing from Eastern Parkway, and the Wednesday Night Fights. So the mid-1950s to the early 1960s, okay? Mid-1950s to the early 1960s, we had boxing on TV became increasingly popular with networks like NBC, ABC, and CBS, all featuring boxing programs. They all had them by the late 50s. Everybody was in the act, NBC, ABC, and CBS, and that's all we had. Like when I was growing up in the 70s, all we had was NBC, ABC, and CBS. We had 3 channels, THREE, 3 channels. That was it. Okay, and certain time of night, they played the national anthem, and was nothing else on TV. It went off till the next morning. TV went off. Yeah, TV went off. They say dun 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 dun, and then it went off till the next morning. Wasn't no watching TV all night back then. Yeah. Jay remember? Yeah, TV went off, man. That was crazy. Later years, 1960s to present. 1960s, 1970s. Closed circuit television, where fights were broadcast to select venues around the country. And that gained popularity, particularly with the fights of Muhammad Ali. That was pay-per-view back in the 60s, early 70s, closed circuit. You had to leave out of your home for that because they held it at various venues like theaters, basketball arenas, like pro or college campuses. They would have the big screen up and would broadcast the fight there. You pay a certain amount of money to go in. That was the pay-per-view back then, yeah. I saw a couple of fights on closed circuit. I think Sugar Ray Hagler. Yeah. But I saw a couple of them on closed circuit TV, yeah. But they showed a lot of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali made closed circuit famous, yeah. Okay. Yeah. The 1960s to the 1980s. ABC's Wide World of Sports, The Thrill of Victory and the Agony of Defeat continued to feature boxing, and other networks like CBS and ESPN started broadcasting boxing as well. Yeah, the Wide World of Sports was the joint, man. They would have a big fight on closed circuit, like on a Tuesday. It'd be on Wide World of Sports that Saturday. Yeah. It'd be on Wide World of Sports that Saturday. With Howard Cosell. 1980s to the present. Pay-per-view boxing became increasingly popular, with networks like Showtime and HBO playing a major role. Okay, 1980s to present again. ESPN has also been a major player in boxing, with programs like Friday Night Fights and its Spanish language counterpart, Noche de Combate. That's not how it went, but something like that. The name of it. I put it in there. I'm famous for putting it in there, right? Pause, putting the words in the chat. Okay, what is it called? Noche de Combate. Anybody seen Thomas Hill? Yeah, that's the name of it right there. De C-O-M Combate. Oh my goodness. Where did I start this? I should have just went on with what I was doing. I'm gonna end the chat. In case I end the chat, I'll see y'all tomorrow. I'll say goodbye ahead of time. There we go. There it is. Noche de Combate. That's the name of this thing. Okay. But yeah, we're finishing up now. Yeah, that was part of ESPN's Spanish language counterpart. ESPN's Spanish language counterpart. Now, 2000s to present. The rise of streaming services like The Zone and ESPN Plus has further diversified boxing's broadcast landscape. Watching ESPN Plus last night. 2010s to present. Premier Boxing Champions, PBC, has been a prominent force in boxing, with their fights broadcast on networks like CBS and Showtime. Okay? Key networks and programs. NBC, Cavalcade of Sports, 1940s to 1960s. ABC, Tomorrow's Boxing Champions, Saturday Night Fights, Fight of the Week, and the Wide World of Sports. CBS had occasionally broadcast boxing events, including those under the PBC banner. Never seen PBC on CBS. Showtime, a major player in pay-per-view boxing, used to be, with their championship boxing series. HBO, a major player in pay-per-view boxing with their World Championship Boxing Series. ESPN, Friday Night Fights, and Noche de Combate. Okay? And then we have The Zone and ESPN Plus. Streaming services, streaming platforms that have become increasingly important in boxing. Yeah, those streaming platforms have become real big. Yeah. Now, on June 1st, 1939, NBC, or technically WNBT, which would eventually become NBC's flagship affiliate, WNBC, became the first American television network to broadcast a boxing match. Well, I said 40s, it was 1939, June 1st, 1939. Emanating from Yankee Stadium in New York City, Bill Stern provided the blow-by-blow commentary for the fight between Lou Nova and Max Baer. That was the first televised fight on American soil. June 1st, 1939. I was 6 months off. I said 40. Okay, June 1st, 1939, Madison Square Garden. Lou Nova and Max Baer. Okay. And that was it, yeah. So yeah, that was a little history of boxing on television. Yeah. Don't forget the profile this week is the Galveston Giant, Jack Johnson himself. Okay. We never did Jack before. We're gonna do him this week though. Got another big week of boxing history coming right at you. Okay. But what we got this weekend in the fight department? This is the 9th, right? I think May 9th. Sounds like something big coming. The Canelo next fight is Bud, right? And Bud's pound. That's pound for pound. If he can go over up there and beat Canelo, he say he the pound for pound best. So that will prove it. If he does that, yeah, that's the textbook definition of pound for pound. Jumping up, beating anybody in any weight class, right? So he jumps up there and does that, he's the man. Oh, May 10th is Saturday. We got Emmanuel Navarrete versus Charlie Flores from San Diego, California. Raymond Muratalla on the card. Oh, Muratalla is going for interim IBF title. Sammy Contreras, Andre Cortez, Giovanni Santillan on the card. Okay. That is a big card. Also Saturday. What? He just can't Velasquez. He's still fighting? The Mean Machine? The Mean Machine is fighting Saturday, y'all. He just can't Velasquez. Wow. From Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. I thought sure Egypt, the Mean Machine was retired. Nico Aliwash on the card. Mm-hmm. And Mean Machine still at welterweight all these years. Anthony Case versus Leigh Wood. Man, unbelievable. We got 4 cards Saturday. Florida, we got Erickson Lubin fighting. Audrio Holmes Jr. Sunday, Fernando Martinez. Okay, Fernando back in there. Ooh, Kazuto Ioka, that should be good. Fernando Martinez and Kazuto Ioka. For Martinez's WBA junior bantamweight title. That's from Tokyo. Okay, Martinez going over there to Japan to fight their Japanese fighter. They must pay them guys some good money. And Martinez is the champion. Why do they continually do that, man? See what happened to Cool Boy. Mm-hmm. Wow. And then we got a card like Tuesday in Australia. Jai Apataya putting his cruiserweight title on the line. Jai Apataya. Mm-hmm. So plenty of boxing coming up. I still can't get over that. They say Tank fighting Jake Paul. Maxie Hughes coming up on the schedule down the line. Couple weeks. Josh Taylor still fighting. Josh Taylor fighting at welterweight, y'all. Uh-oh. Josh Taylor went on up to welterweight. He couldn't make 140 no more, so he couldn't wait for Boots to leave. He had to go on up there if he wanted to make that money because he couldn't. Josh Taylor's big. He couldn't make 140 anymore, so he went on up. And he's now at welterweight. He's in the ring on May 24th. Josh Taylor. That's all right. And Caleb Plant in May, coming up in May. When is the trilogy between Keyshawn Davis and Edward De Los Santos? June 7th at the Scope. Abdullah Mason on the card. Abdullah stepping up. Abdullah going up against Nakathila. Going up against Nakathila. That's a good step up, for good test for Abdullah. Nakathila can pop. I think Abdullah will get him. Muratala got him, remember. Nakatala's becoming a gatekeeper, fighting these young fighters, man. Calvin and Keon on the card. Yeah. Troy Isley, Tiger Johnson, Derek Davis, some of the top ranks big young fighters. Nakatani, June 8th. And get to June 21st. Richardson Hitchens, George Kambosos, June 14th. In New York. Brian Norman Jr. going to Tokyo. There you go. Jin Sasaki. I told him about going over there for them Japanese fighters over there in Japan. There he goes. That could be it for Norman's title. Vito Melnicki. Okay. Back in action. Jahai Tucker versus Truck Simpson. That should be a good one. Jahai and Truck. Is Tank and Lamont Roach called off? I didn't hear. This damn show ain't on here. Yeah, that should be a good one. Jahai Tucker and Truck Simpson. Looking forward to that one. But yeah, Brian Norman going over to Japan. He got the title. Going to be great. See what happened to Cool Boy. But that was the monster. This guy ain't the monster. No. He's fighting Jin Sasaki. June 19th. So the schedule is looking great. We're in good shape as boxing fans. Hope everybody enjoyed the boxing history today. I definitely learned something. I learned something every day too. I forgot the guy's name already. I was just getting ready to look up. Yeah, the monster says he's fighting MJ next in August. Can MJ do it? Oh no. I'm trying to look up something right quick before we get out of here. Just do boxing. Should be next. If I see a thumbnail for him, I can let you know if he's coming up today. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, we got like 4 cards this weekend though. Okay, let me let you know in a minute. Just do boxing. That's me. How was everybody's weekend though? Do anything exciting? Yeah, Just Do is coming up next at 4 p.m. today. Yeah. But I appreciate everybody that stopped by here today. Hit my like on the way out. Hit Just Do's like on the way in. We're talking about Canelo silk pajama syndrome. Anyway, dropped. Wins by knockout. Big water hitter Tim Bradley whips Haney. Roll some balls. Trash. I think Tim could have beat Prime versus Prime, Tim Bradley and Devin. I don't know. I think I would pick Devin in that one. Yeah. But okay, appreciate everybody coming through today. Just Do Boxing is up next. We're going to be back tomorrow with some more boxing history. Okay. Hardcore Boxing News, hashtag JBT, Al Booger, Mike Mazik, BN Boxing News, Bruce Gas, Boxing Jazz, and more. Kensaw Love 1, Jeril Hattie, Miss Cass. Okay? Be sure to stop by tomorrow, same time, same place. Because if it's Monday through Friday at 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Just Do Boxing got something good for you coming up in moments. This is Cass Sports. Appreciate y'all 1,000%. Y'all around these YouTube streets. Everybody have a great afternoon.